Hello YouTube, in today's video I'm going to tell you exactly which blood markers you should check when doing a blood work. Now I'm assuming you're enhanced, but this video is also meant for naturals because just because you're natural doesn't mean that you are perfectly healthy and doesn't mean that you shouldn't check blood work. I think everybody should check blood work at least once per year, no matter whether you are natural and enhanced. Now if you're natural, not using anything, and if you are generally healthy, I think doing blood work like once or twice per year is more than enough. When you are enhanced, I think you should do it more often. How often? Well, it depends. It depends on how healthy you are in general. It depends on how good was your previous blood work looking, and it also depends on how abusive you are. Like I would say, the more sauced you are, the more you abuse stuff, the more you abuse PEDs, the more often you should check your blood work. Now, if you're just like on some TRT doing like 100, 150, 200 milligrams of test, I don't think you need to do it as often. But if you're like juicing 2 grams of gear, lots of oral Stren, and like those more harsh performance enhancing drugs, I think blood work should be done pretty much on monthly or at least every 2 months, you know. Like the more abusive you are, the more often you should check your blood work. Now, let's get into it. Like, what blood markers should you check? First thing, you should always check with pretty much every single blood work you do, no matter whether you are drug-free or enhanced, and also no matter what kinds of drugs are you using or not using, is the complete blood count. So basically, by that I mean your white blood cells, your red blood cells, your hematocrit, your hemoglobin, your monocytes, your lymphocytes, and so on and so on. So by checking complete blood count, you will be able to track things like, for example, polycythemia, which means that your red blood cells are going too high, which is very common occurrence, especially among the steroid users, because steroids are erythropoietic compounds. They stimulate the production of erythropoietin, which then stimulates the production of more red blood cells, and then you can end up being polycythemic, which is obviously not good because it can make you hypertensive, and also it just in general puts more stress on your heart because now you have higher blood volume, your blood is thicker, and your heart needs to work harder in order to pump this blood through your blood vessels. And the second thing is that being polycythemic greatly increases your chances of getting potentially dangerous blood clots. So you definitely don't want to be polycythemic, so that's why you need to track your complete blood count. Now, the opposite of polycythemia, which can also be tracked via complete blood count, so that is anemia. So basically, polycythemia means that your red blood cells, hematocrit, hemoglobin are too high. Anemia means that your red blood cells, hematocrit, hemoglobin are too low. So this is kind of unlikely scenario with steroid users. Usually steroid users are more polycythemic and not really anemic, but it can indicate some other issue. For example, it can tell you that you have some unrecognized, to say, bleeding inside your gastrointestinal tract, or you may be iron deficient, either by not consuming enough iron or by your gastrointestinal tract not being able to absorb iron, or you might be vitamin B12 deficient, which is kind of unlikely scenario unless you're vegan. And yeah, so you shouldn't be anemic, you shouldn't be polycythemic, your red blood cells, hematocrit, and hemoglobin should be inside the reference age. Now, another thing that you can track via complete blood count is if you have any infection or active inflammation going on in your body. Usually your white blood cells, so lymphocytes and monocytes, will be increased due to that. So also another great thing that you can track via complete blood count. So moving on. Now we have complete blood count. Next thing that you should check when doing a blood work is hormone panel. And basically, again, you should do that no matter whether you're drug-free or enhanced. If you're drug-free, you should check also follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and also very closely check your total and free testosterone, just to see where your natural testosterone production is at. When you are enhanced, you don't really need to track follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and also I don't think it's that important to check testosterone, because if you're injecting testosterone, you kind of know it's high. But also in both scenarios, you should check your estrogen, especially if you're enhanced, because aromatizable compounds can cause your estrogen to go too high. If you use, for example, aromatase inhibitors or too little test base and too much DHTs, your estrogen might go too low. So that's why I think estrogen is very important hormone to check. Next hormone that you should check in both cases, no matter whether you're natural or enhanced, is prolactin, because many different things can affect prolactin and can cause increases in prolactin. Especially very important to check prolactin if you're using drugs like nandrolone, trembolone, or something like MK677, because all those drugs can greatly increase prolactin. Then next hormone you should check, both no matter whether you're natural or enhanced, is cortisol. I think also very important hormone to check. It can tell you that your body is in overly stressed state, whether you're just stressing out too much or you are overtrained, because it's a very good indicator for overtraining. When you're overtrained, your cortisol levels go up. And then certain drugs can increase cortisol as well, like for example, taking MK677 is very well known to do that, or for example, abusing caffeine too much. So you definitely don't want to have too high cortisol. That's why I think you should check it. And then the last hormone I would check is SHBG, or sex hormone binding globulin. With naturals is usually a bit higher, when with enhanced people is usually too low, because androgens lower SHBG, especially DHTs are very well known to do that. So you definitely don't want to have your SHBG either too high or too low. And that's pretty much it from when it comes to hormone panel. So that's all I think that you need to check. And then moving on to third thing that you should check, and those are your lipids. So basically your lipid panel or your cholesterols. So again, you should do that no matter whether you are natural or enhanced, because just because you're natural doesn't mean that you have good cholesterol. Many natural people have very screwed up cholesterol. So with lipids, you should check your total cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, which is known to be the bad cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol, which is known to be the good cholesterol, and your triglycerides. So you want to have low LDL, because like usually the higher your LDL and triglycerides are, the worse it is for your cardiovascular health. Or also, you don't want to have, for example, too low HDL. Usually with steroid users, HDL goes pretty low, especially when using orals or some DHT orals, like Winstrol in particular is very notorious for drastically lowering HDL levels. But again, here's a question about how dangerous is it really to have low HDL, considering that your LDL and triglycerides are low. I think up until now we don't have any proofs that like lowering your HDL, if your LDL and triglycerides are not high, increases any mortality risk at all. But I may be wrong, so don't take me for a word. I'm just not smart enough to tell you that. But from what I think it's more important to keep LDL and triglycerides low than it is to keep your HDL high, because increased triglycerides and LDL are directly linked to increased risk of cardiovascular disease. That's pretty much it about the lipid panel. Maybe if you're able to, you should check also lipoprotein little a, which is a very good indicator of your cardiovascular risk, to say. But honestly, I don't know where to check it. Like, you can check it in just like every local lab. I've asked in like, I think 2 or 3 labs about it, and they said that they can check it. So, but yeah, if you have an option to check lipoprotein little a, then of course check it as well, because it's also very important. So that's it about the lipids. Now moving on to 2 liver tests. Now, these are only important, in my opinion, if you're doing something that is stressing out your liver. So if you're natural, considering that you are not alcoholic or taking any substances that are harmful to your liver, or if you're enhanced and you're doing only injectables and not taking orals, with the only exception being trembolone and Winstrol suspension, which can affect liver markers. Like Winstrol suspension is almost as liver toxic as oral Winstrol. But if you're not doing any of those 2, if you're doing only injections, or if you're natural and you're not alcoholic or something like that, I don't think it's that important to check liver markers. But in case you are doing orals or anything else that can be toxic to your liver, then what you should check is liver enzymes, SAT and ALT, but keep in mind that they can be elevated just because of the training. So training and muscle damage can mask the liver injury, to say. So if you, for example, train today, chest, legs, whatever, if you create any muscle damage through exercise, and then you check liver enzymes tomorrow, they will most likely be elevated. So if you want to get to see the real picture of your liver enzymes, then I suggest you take at least like 3-4 days of rest before you go checking them. Then also other markers that you should check when it comes to liver. One is alkaline phosphatase. Then you should check bilirubin, especially if you start noticing that like your skin looks yellow and your eyes are looking yellow, even though it's like very rare. Like you won't get that unless you're like alcoholic or some really hard oral abuser, but like otherwise you shouldn't get that. Like if you get the jaundice, or how it's called, like it means that something is definitely not good with your liver. That usually means that your bilirubin is too high. Then also the last liver marker I think you should check is gamma GT, or how it's pronounced, and it's probably the most important liver marker for tracking liver damage. Although I also see it very rarely elevated in people, but if it's elevated, it means that you should do something about it, right? So that was it about liver markers. Now let's move on to kidneys. So first kidney marker that I think you should check is glomerular filtration rate. So basically, on short is I think EGFR or something like that. So basically, it tells you how well are your kidneys functioning. So the higher the glomerular filtration, the better your kidneys are working. The lower the glomerular filtration, the worse your kidneys are working. So you definitely don't want to see your glomerular filtration declining from blood work to blood work, because that means that your kidneys are not doing really well, and you should be very cautious about that, because it's not like with liver. Liver forgives. So you can abuse your liver. You can be alcoholic for multiple years. You can take a lot of orals, and then you stop, and they will repair, and like nothing happened. But once you damage your kidneys, it's very hard to repair them. Like damage is there, and you are in stage this and this and this kidney failure, or how to say. So be very cautious about your kidney markers. If they are not looking well, you need to do something about it. It's not like with liver, oh, my liver enzymes are a little bit high, it's not a problem. Like, no, with kidneys, if your kidney markers are looking bad, you need to do something about it now. Don't let it get worse. So next kidney marker that you should check is creatinine. So basically it tells you like how well are your kidneys filtrating creatinine from your blood. But keep in mind that creatinine can be elevated in muscular individuals, and it also can be elevated in people that take creatine. So just because like your creatinine is high and your kidney markers are in range of normal, it doesn't mean you need to panic. But if it's like alarming, they're like very high, and if your other kidney markers are not looking good too, then probably it can indicate the problem with your kidneys. And then moving on to third liver marker that you should, kidney marker that you should test is uric acid. Now, uric acid can also be high due to you being dehydrated, so make sure that you don't go do blood test without drinking any water before, because it most likely is going to be a little bit elevated. So again, a minor elevations in uric acid might just mean that you didn't drink enough water, so make sure that you're hydrated. But if your uric acid is like chronically very high, it can indicate the kidney issue. Then moving on to what is cystatin C, but I don't think you can check this one in every lab, just like with lipoprotein little a. But if you have option to check it, then check it as well, because it's a very good indicator of your kidney function. So I think that's pretty much it for kidneys. Now what we have left, there is the blood glucose and the hemoglobin A1C, but I don't think you need to check that unless you are diabetic or have some extreme cases of diabetes in your family, or if you're using some drugs that can mess up with your blood sugars, like for example MK677 and other growth hormone secretagogues, or if you're using HGH. In that case, yes, it's good to check your blood glucose and your hemoglobin A1C, but otherwise you can also do that from your home by buying that machine or glucometer or glucose meter or something like that. So that machine that measures blood glucose, I think you don't need to check it on the Bloodwork. So blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C only if you're using any drugs that can cause diabetes, but you don't need to do that in Bloodwork. You can do that at home with that machine. And then what else should you check? Oh, and one more very important thing to check, and this is not kidney marker, but inflammation marker. So it measures systemic inflammation in your body, and that is CRP or C-reactive protein. So if you have any active inflammation in your body, your CRP levels will be elevated. I think the highest normal is 5. If it's more than 5, it means that you have some inflammatory reaction in your body, which you don't necessarily need to panic about it. Like if you have one Bloodwork that shows high CRP, it may be just some flu or you catching some virus or I don't know, just some random thing that you don't need to panic about. But if it's high over the multiple Bloodworks you do, then it may indicate that like you have some poor quality carrier oils that are causing you inflammatory response, or for example, heart disease. Like if your CRP is chronically high, it can indicate that you have inflammation around your arteries, which is very dangerous. So you definitely don't want to keep your CRP to be chronically high. If it's high only once, as I said, nothing to worry about. It can happen just by you catching some infection or something like that. But if it's chronically high, is definitely not good. You should do something about it to lower it and to bring it below 5 again. And yeah, I think, guys, that's pretty much it. Now, I think those are the things that you should check in your Bloodwork. But again, I know that not every one of you will check everything I mentioned in every Bloodwork you do, and I don't do that either, to be honest. I think things that you should check more often are complete blood count, hormones, CRP, and kidney function. I think that is something you should check. Like, again, as I said, the more abusive you are, the more often you should check. So if you're like abusing the shit out of it, you should check them like every month or 2. If you're not abusive, if you're just doing some TRT, I think it's fine to check it like every 5-6 months, let's say. And then liver tests you only do, as I said, if you're abusing orals or something else that can harm your liver. Otherwise, I don't think you need to check them. Like, you can check them once a year is more than enough. And also lipids, I don't think you need to check lipids that often. Like again, go by feel. Like, for example, if you do a Bloodwork today and your cholesterol comes back like really high, then of course you don't want to wait for like another 1 year and then check it again. In that case, you want to check it sooner, of course. But if your cholesterol comes back like really good and you're like, oh, I have perfect cholesterol, then you don't need to be stressing about it and checking it again in 1 or 2 months, because it probably won't change that much. So it's like, cholesterol is a thing. Like, even if you have high cholesterol for 4, 5, 6 months, it won't really kill you. Like, it's more the thing that will kill you like over the years if you have it chronically high. And it's not even necessary that will kill you, but it's a good indicator of cardiovascular risk. So having high cholesterol does put you at greater risk of having cardiovascular events. So, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Maybe I just forgot to mention electrolytes. It's good to check electrolytes as well. If you're natural, and if you're not natural but not using any kind of drugs that can screw up your electrolyte balances, I think it's not that important, but it's always good to like check them. So like, you can check them like every 6 months to a year with your Bloodworks, or if you're using though any like ARBs or ACE inhibitors or potassium sparing diuretics, or even just eating like super crazy high potassium diet, then I think you should check them more often, just so there is you make sure that there are no any kind of hyperkalemias or hyponatremias or any other electrolyte imbalances occurring. And yeah, that's it for today's video. Like always, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment to support the channel's growth. If you need online coaching, or if you just want to ask me a question or anything, you can always DM me on Instagram, and see you in next video.